rely on electricity and technology for everything from entertainment to paying the bills to medical necessities and powering our homes. There's literally nothing in our lives that isn't touched by technology and electricity one way or another. While this has made life convenient and productive, it's something that quite a few of us, me included, take for granted. Behind every bit of data that travels through the internet, there's hardware attached to it. That hardware, whether it be something as simple as a cell phone, an ATM, computer servers, or even large transformers and power lines that carry electricity across the country, all have vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities could be exploited by hackers, could be caused by lack of maintenance, negligence, and even age. And the worst case scenario would be another nation decides to take down parts or all of the power grid. Now, this last scenario may seem a little bit far-fetched to some people, but wars aren't fought the way they used to be. A first strike could be something as simple as disabling our ability to function, communicate, and coordinate by taking out the grid. Now, I'm sure the government and the military have planned for this and they have contingencies in place, but the rest of the country would be put into a grid down apocalypse that could take a long time to recover from. In this video, I want to cover the possibility and the likelihood of some of these grid down scenarios and the consequences each of these would hold. How we prepare for a 3-day power outage is going to be a lot different than preparing for a 3-month or longer complete grid down event. This will also help you get prepared for some of these smaller scenarios while you're working on some of this long-term sustainability. It wouldn't take long for society to completely break down without the internet and electricity. And in this situation, our needs are going to consist of more than just a few solar panels and a power station. The longer things go on, the more complicated things get. Now, before I get into the meat of this video, I do want to say something really quick. I know there are some of you out there that think it's completely unnecessary to prepare for these longer term power outages or grid down events. And the odds are that we will be fine if we don't. And while that's true, the odds are we'll never kill somebody in a car accident, yet we're still required to hold bodily harm insurance. The odds are we'll never have to use our homeowner's insurance for anything other than replacing the roof shingles, but we'll be glad we have it if the house burns down. My point is that you do what you feel is right for you. If you feel like liability insurance is enough, then you go ahead and do that. But if you're like me and you want full coverage, you're going to need to have more than a few candles and some flashlights. Now, before we get into some of the things that we can do to prepare for these longer term type events, it's important that we understand that preparing for a grid down event is going to be different depending on the severity, regardless of how long it lasts. When it comes to severity, I basically break it down into 4 categories. And these are your neighborhood, your city, your state, and countrywide. A 1-week power outage that is nationwide is going to be much different than a neighborhood power outage. There are going to be much different secondary and third order effects in that situation. So let's talk about your neighborhood and your city. And in a situation where it's a localized disaster like this, the odds are there will be opportunity for outside resources to get in and help. So something that is a week, if it lasts longer than a week, it's probably a bigger issue than just your neighborhood or city, but something that lasts a day, 3 days, a week, the odds are that help will be able to get in. Now that depends on a number of different factors like how many neighborhoods and how many cities, but the odds are there will be outside help that's possible to get to you, to reach you and your city. When you talk about a statewide or a countrywide grid down type situation, that's when things become more complicated, because if it's statewide, the odds are it's not a single state, because there are 3 main power grids in the United States, 4 if you count Alaska. So it's probably not going to be a statewide thing. It's going to be a third of the country. And when you're talking about countrywide, there are much bigger issues at play than just not having electricity. If something is countrywide, it's possible that it's global, and there are other countries and other people that will seize on opportunities. And as I said earlier, a number of different things you need to factor in as far as what happens next, those secondary and third order effects. Most videos you'll see on the internet talk about the neighborhood or citywide, a localized power outage, the supplies you would need for that. And honestly, the odds are that 90% of the time, that's what we will be looking at. But it is a gamble to say that it's not ever going to happen. Now, granted, it's not something we should devote our entire preparedness plan around preparing for going back to the Stone Ages, but it is something that we need to think about and need to address. So with that in mind, let's go over some of these different scenarios and think about these as far as time frame and severity. And to start off with, we'll talk about a basic power outage, which is sort of just an inconvenience, right? Something that lasts a day, maybe even less than that, maybe just a few hours, and it's localized to your neighborhood. Something that we see millions of videos about, right? The different supplies we need, the batteries, the flashlights, the power banks, all of those things just to get through that inconvenience. This is something that most of us in the United States or around the world are bound to face at one point or another. So this is one of those highly likely scenarios that we should have all of this stuff prepared for. I've got a couple videos on the basic power outage supplies and the things that you'll need. And even in this scenario, if it were a statewide or countrywide situation, it's not a large enough time frame for things to get really bad, right? Things aren't going to start to decay in a day. Yes, they will get a little bit challenging, but it's not going to be all out chaos in one day. It would take a little bit longer than that. And that's where you sort of get into that 3 days to a week without power. And this is where things could start to get crazy. This is where that inconvenience turns into uncertainty, and also a situation where you're going to get what I call prepper hate, is people saying you've got too much of this and I don't have any of that, and the hoarding and all the things you hear about preparedness. And this is also the point where some of the critical infrastructure may begin to fail. You've got the water systems, you've got fuel, just being able to get fuel out of the gasoline out of the pumps. You've got the ability to get fuel to different places in the first place. After, a day or two, it's probably going to be fine. After that, that's when the dominoes start to fall, and things start to unravel, I suppose. You've also got the nuclear power plants, which I'm not a nuclear power plant specialist or anything, but I believe they have about a week's supply of backup power. So this is that time frame where maybe there are resources available, but eventually that's going to run out. So that would become an issue as well. A lot of the critical infrastructure, even the policing and things like that, as grocery stores run out of food and crime begins to rise, that could start to become a real big issue in just 1 week. Now, 1 week on a localized scale, maybe not so bad. You're talking about your town. There's going to be a lot of outside resources that are going to be able to help with that. You're still going to have to deal with some of these situations. But if it's a countrywide situation, that's where having some of these larger power banks, having a large amount of food stored so you don't have to get out, having that self-defense, those home defense and home security, all of those things become really important, because this is that time frame where you will want to hunker down, stay put, and not put yourself in dangerous situations. So a 1 week power outage on a localized level, it is an inconvenience and could be bad, but a 1 week power outage on a national level or even global level, that's when things really start to kick up, and we really need to take all of this stuff very, very seriously. Now, when you move up to 2 weeks to a month, I don't know that there's going to be anything that's localized, say your neighborhood or your city, your town, because 2 weeks to a month means it's a huge issue. Because if it's just your town or your city, they're going to be able to get resources in, they're going to be able to help things out, and they're going to be able to get things done. But if it's something that takes longer than a couple of weeks, I think you're looking at a bigger issue, and an issue that, if it can't be fixed in that time frame, what's causing that? And I think this is where 2 weeks to a month, you need to really think about. This is probably something that is pretty widespread. And in a scenario like this, you're talking about, this is where chaos really kicks in. The die-off we hear about all the time, 90% of people will die. This is where that, at the very least, starts. You've got the resources that have completely run dry at this point. You're talking about hospitals not having the resources, the staffing, or the supplies. You're talking about water systems and all the things I was talking about earlier, the fuel, not just being able to get the fuel up from the pumps, but the fuel getting refined and getting to those gas stations in the first place. Governments and local authorities would be completely overwhelmed by this. You saw Katrina, how they barely had the resources to handle that. So if you're looking at something that is a few different states or even nationwide, there's no possible way they can handle that, which in turn would bring in that martial law aspect. And back to Katrina again, you saw that how the Constitution will be the rights and everything that we believe we have these days would all be gone. In Katrina, they went and they did gun confiscation during Katrina. So to think that wouldn't happen is sort of naive, because that was a localized disaster and they absolutely did that. So when you're talking about 2 weeks to a month where crime is completely rampant, resources are very slim and people are fighting for those resources, you know that it's going to be a martial law type situation. And also in this situation, you're talking about groups forming, and even possibly in, before this, as preppers, we probably have this, or we should have this figured out anyway, about getting groups together. If something's lasting a week or two, that's when we're at least contacting people and figuring out what our game plan is going to be. At 2 weeks to a month, we need to have that group figured out, because other people will. I think in that middle range that I was talking about, that 1 week to 2 weeks, the bad guys will have gotten their groups together, and some already do. They're just waiting for the opportunity. So as good guys, we need to make sure we have those groups as well, because we can't go it alone. If we're going alone, the odds are we're going to end up being a part of that die-up. Now, also in this situation, there really is no guarantee. I want to say that just because you've prepared, just because you've got your food stored, just because you've got your ammunition and things like that, doesn't guarantee anything. This is a situation where you're going to have to make the best possible choices and cross your fingers. There are going to be people in this situation that survive that have no business, and where you never would have thought they would have survived. So you just don't know. But all we can do is the best that we can do, and be ready for these situations if and when they do happen. Like I said earlier, the odds of something this large scale happening are much slimmer than the odds of a local power outage, a few days, or anything like that. But it's not off the table. And I think that's why, as preppers or people interested in preparedness, we don't necessarily need to dwell on a situation like this, but we need to think about it, and we need to think about what we would do. And even if nothing happens, it can only help our situation anyway. If we figure out a way to get our whole home powered on solar energy, that's going to decrease our monthly bills, and it's going to help us in the long run regardless. If we have the food storage, having a year's worth of food stored isn't more expensive, it's just more cost up front. You're stockpiling that stuff beforehand. And regardless of what people say, preppers do not cause shortages in situations like this. In situations like this, we should have everything that we need and not have to go out to the grocery store and ransack it and get the last roll of toilet papers and things like that. In a situation like this, we should have everything we need to stay put, stay hunkered down, and protect ourselves and the things that we have. That's why we need to think about scenarios like this. There could be a number of different causes for this, and we just really don't know. That's why when you go past a month, there's just really no way to tell, because all of the different aspects of this, we just don't know how they're going to unfold. So all we can do is prepare to get through these situations that I've talked about today, and be smart enough and educated enough to try to navigate the situations that are going to present themselves. And we have no idea what those could be. So as I said earlier, most of the situations that we are going to face in our lifetime are going to be those localized, short-term disaster scenarios where we can get a little bit of extra food storage, we can get a little bit of power, lights, batteries, flashlights, things like that. That's what we are most likely to face. But that doesn't mean these other scenarios are off the table. And even scenarios that are caused by economics, maybe you just can't afford to pay the bills. Those situations could present themselves too, and that's what we need to sort of be preemptive about this and prepare for those, because most people just sort of react after things happened, and that's the worst time to do it because everybody else is reacting as well, and that would put you in a dangerous spot. So it's important to prepare for these shorter term situations, but it's also important to think about and work on the long-term sustainability, whether that's gardening, whether that's renewable energy. You've got solar power, you've got wind power if solar's not an option, you've got hydropower, a lot of different things that we won't be able to generate the amount of electricity we use today, but if we start working on those now, we can generate enough to survive, just like they survived 1,000, 2,000 years ago without electricity. Those skills have been lost by people these days, and for us to know about those, learn about those, and sort of implement those as much as we can, we'll be a step ahead of everyone else. And the next video that'll be coming out is how to prepare, what supplies you will need for these longer term type situations, whether that be a week or a month, and what sort of thing.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all the praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem, Rakakwadash. Double honors and respect to the elders and to the apostle of the great millstone. Peace and blessing, as always, to the elect house of David that are scattered abroad. I give you my utmost and sincere salutations, as well as the sincere Akim Akwath and children that are listening and learning. So, yeah, this video is it's by the bug out location called A Grid Down Apocalypse: Survive Without Power When Technology Fails. So really, what are you gonna do when the lights go out? You know, like he said, everything is pretty much connected to technology, electricity, running water, internet, so on and so forth. So you have no running water, no electricity, no internet. The hospitals are shut down. You can't get to the police, you can't get to the fire department, you can't get to the paramedics. And the storehouses will soon be found empty because people are going to be looting and plundering, grabbing what little they can before everything is just completely gone. So what are you going to do? These are things you have to ask yourself in certain scenarios. You know, and we're coming to that time where, you know, we don't know when things could pop off, but when they do, you know, expect the worst. So I'm going to go ahead and get some scripts, and Lord willing, be edifying. I'm going to start off with the book of, it's going to be the book of Exodus. It's going to be chapter 10. Exodus chapter 10. Verse 21. And it says, And Yahweh said unto Moses, Stretch out thine hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. So a darkness so thick that you could feel it. And it says, and Moses, no, this is verse 22, and it says, and Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. 23, they saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. So, again, man, so a thick darkness that it can be felt. So let's see. Now when you go to the word darkness in the blue letter here, it goes back to the Hebrew H2822. It goes to darkness, obscurity, a secret place. And going to the Strong's definition, the dark, hence literally darkness, figuratively misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness. But, you know, go into the root word, it says this.
Strong's H2821. Chashach.
It says chashak. So to become dark, grow dim, be darkened. Okay, to hide, to conceal, to obscure. So, and you know, but it says that thick darkness that may be felt, right? Well, let's see what the let's get the Book of Wisdom of Solomon. But first, you know, like we were saying, there's darkness, right? So, you know, the grids go down, you know, and he said there's 3 power grids that are pretty much major throughout the US, right? So, if any, it's not going to be just a statewide thing. It's going to be multiple states that are going to get hit. And if all 3 of the grids go down, that's the whole country, right? So, and in those scenarios, you know, people are going to be, let's see, let me get the scripture. Give me the book of 2nd Ezra, chapter, let's see. It's going to be, let's see. Salakia. That's 2nd Ezra chapter 6, verse 22. And it says, and suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, the full storehouses shall suddenly be empty. Okay, meaning that, you know, when these shortages hit, or, you know, when the power goes up, people are going to be, you know, going back to panic buying and hoarding and all that, getting what they can at the last minute. And it says here in verse 23, the trumpet shall give a sound. And what's that trumpet? Okay, which when every man heareth, they shall be suddenly afraid. So that trumpet, that giving a sound, that's the prophets. We are that trumpet that's sounding the alarm. Excuse me. Verse 24, at that same time, or 24, at that time shall friends fight one against another like enemies, and the earth shall stand in fear with those that are dwelt within. The springs of the fountain shall stand still, and in 3 hours they shall not run. Okay, so again, no running water, and people are going to be fighting amongst each other. So that's how it says in the book of Isaiah, chapter 33, verse 6, and it says, thy wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. So you have to get your mind ready for this. And yes, also prepare physically, but you want to prepare ultimately spiritually. So that way you don't bug out or lose, you know, self-control in this type of situation. Because when something like this happens, like you said, like in a day or 2 or week, yeah, and you know, local, it'll get bad, but if it's nationwide, yeah, it's gonna get something serious. And you know, people they're gonna lose it because they're having their comfort taken from them. Okay. So here we go. This is going to be the Book of Wisdom of Solomon. It's going to be chapter 17. Starting at verse 1, it says, for great are thy judgments. Actually, before I get this, let me get the book of Luke. the book of Luke, chapter 21, and verse 11. Or so actually, I'm going to start at verse 10, because remember, you know, somewhere towards the beginning of this video, the man said, you know, that, you know, war is not done the same because you have cyber war, cybersecurity, cyber attacks, and things of that nature. Okay? And it says here, Luke 21 and 10, it says, Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. Fearful sights, storms, you know, ICBMs, amongst other things too, the chariots, okay? Great signs shall there be from heaven, okay? There's going to be a whole bunch of things going on. And, you know, like this man said, you know, in that time when society just loses it because they have, you know, they don't have no more of the convenience, that's when they're going to implement that martial law, which Trump has started to do, starting with Minneapolis and Minnesota. Okay, so let me go back to that script I just had. That was Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 17, verse 1. This is concerning, you know, going back to the thick darkness that can be felt. You know, this is what's going to take place. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 17, verse 1, it says, For great are thy judgments, and cannot be expressed. Therefore unnurtured souls have erred. So, you know, these judgments are great and cannot be expressed. You know, words cannot express just how terrifying and how great these judgments are going to be. All we can do is just witness, bear witness. And the unnurtured souls have erred. And the unnurtured souls are the ones that are unlearned in this truth. Okay, verse 2. For when unrighteous men thought to oppress the holy nation, they being shut up in their houses, the prisoners of darkness, and fettered with the bonds of a long night, lay their exile from the eternal providence. Verse 3, For while they supposed to lie hid in their secret sins, they were scattered under a dark veil of forgetfulness, being horribly astonished and troubled with strange apparitions. Okay, so these people that are on Yahweh Shem Shai's hit list are going to be plagued with these terrifying judgments, strange apparitions. Okay, you know, terrifying spirits on the left-hand side. And you got, and it says here in verse 4, For neither might the corner that held them keep them from fear, but noises as of water falling down sounded about them, and sad visions appeared unto them with heavy countenances. So this fear, you know, hiding in a corner of your room isn't gonna save you. Okay, you can't hide from the boogeyman. You know how they always be hiding from the boogeyman, that be just quietly waiting under their bed and all that, or you're hiding in the corner of your room so no one can see you, or you think it's the safest place. That's not going to be. In verse 5 it says, No power of the fire might give them light, neither could the bright flames of the stars endure to lighten that horrible night. So you won't be able to light no candles, no flames, no torches to give yourself light, and nor the bright flames of the stars endure. So you won't be seeing anything. It'll be completely pitch black inside and outside. Okay. Verse 6, Only there appeared unto them a fire kindled of itself, very dreadful, for being much terrified. They thought the things which they saw to be worse than the sight they saw not. So, you know, when verse 7, As for the illusions of art magic, they were put down, and their vaunting in wisdom was reproved and disgraced. So, you know, all this divination, all this worshiping and following other gods and the psychics and all that, it was all reproved and disgraced. That shit has no power over what Yahweh Shem Shai is going to bring as far as judgment's concerned. Verse 8, for they that promise to drive away terrors and troubles from a sick soul were sick themselves of fear worthy to be laughed at. So, let me get the scripture. This is going to be the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 1. I'm going to I'll start at verse 23. Actually, verse 22. Proverbs 1 and 22, and it says, how long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. So, how long will you continue to be stupid, Israel? Verse 23, turn you at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you, and I will make known my words unto you. So repent and listen to Yahweh Shem Shai's words, man. Through his prophets that are out there in the highways and byways. Those men that be wearing those garments that you be making fun of all day and night, those are the men you should be listening to. 24, because I have called, and ye refused, I have stretched out my hand, and no man regarded. Verse 25, but ye have set at naught all my counsel, and would none of my reproof. So you just wasn't having it. Even though you were given the opportunity to get this knowledge, wisdom, understanding, you still turn it down and go about your own business like it's nothing. And that's what it says here in verse 26. I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your fear cometh. When your fear cometh as desolation, and your destruction cometh as a whirlwind, when distress and anguish cometh upon you. 28, then shall they call upon me, but I will not answer. They shall seek me early, but they shall not find me. 29, for they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of Yahweh. So there you go. You would prefer to be doing your own thing rather than listening to Yahweh Shem Shai through his prophets. And that's why y'all are going to end up in the sore case. Okay? This is going to be Psalms 78 and 40. Let's see. Let's see. Psalm 78, and I'll start at verse 40, and it says, how oft did they provoke him in the wilderness, and grieve him in the desert? Talking about the Israelites provoking the Lord to wrath. 41, yea, they turned back and tempted the Most High, and limited the Holy One of Israel. Okay, so they tempted him, they openly mocked him, disrespected him. Verse 42, they remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy. 43, how he had wrought his signs in Egypt, and his wonders in the fields of Zoan. 44, and had turned their rivers into blood, and their floods, that they could not drink. 45, he sent diverse sorts of flies among them, which devoured them, and frogs which destroyed them. 46, he gave also their increase unto the caterpillar, and their labor unto the locust. Verse 47, he destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamore trees with frost. 48, he gave up their cattle also to the hail, and their flocks to hot thunderbolts. So Yahweh Shem Shai fucked up Egypt back then. Literally destroyed them of their agriculture, their just everything. Okay, in verse 49 says here, he cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath and indignation and trouble, by sending evil angels among them. So there you go, evil angels. Going back to the Apocrypha, in the book of Ecclesiasticus, chapter 39, let's see, Ecclesiasticus chapter 39, verse 27, it says, all these things are for the good to the godly, so to the sinners they are turned into evil. 28, there be spirits that are created for vengeance, which in their fury lay on sore strokes in the time of destruction. They pour out their force and appease the wrath of him that made them. So, these are vengeful spirits at work. Okay? And all these things are for good to the godly. Why is that? Because we're hastening the day of getting up out of this place. So every time we see a calamity, that's joyous to us, because we would love to see the downfall of our enemies and their structure. But so to the sinners, they are turned to evil. So to the people that refuse to repent, to the 2/3 that refuse to repent, man, the falling down of this system is going to be absolute evil and hell to them, because they love it here. They want to stay here. They want to be here. Verse 29, fire and hail and famine and death, all these were created for vengeance. 30, teeth of wild beasts and scorpions, serpents, and the sword punishing the wicked to destruction. So there you go, man. So, again, with this whole thing with, once the grid goes down and all that, however long it may be, a week, 2 weeks to a month, that's when people are really going to start just letting loose, let the beast out. Okay? So, again, what are you going to do in a blackout scenario when the power grid goes down? Are you going to keep your wits about you, keep your faith, or are you going to end up like the rest of these people out here, just a bug out, looting and plundering, killing and doing all sorts of other things, acting like a wild animal? And with that, I hope this was edifying. It wasn't meant to be long, but the Spirit took me here. And with closing, I'd like to give all the honor, glory, and praise unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors and respect to the elders and to the apostles, the great millstone. Peace and blessing to all Akim that are preaching and teaching this word with 100% truth and sincerity. And unto the men, women, and children that are listening and learning. And unto the Bayath, the Dawadah, the elect house of David that is scattered abroad. I give you my utmost and sincere citations. See you in the next lesson, Lord willing. Kwame Ashavala, Wa Ba Shalom, Barakatham.